This podcast is brought to you by Customplan Financial Advisors, Inc., an independent insurance managing general agency in Canada. Financialpodcast.ca was developed with one goal in mind: to educate Canadians on important topics that affect their financial well-being and make it readily available to all. We welcome you to plug in and learn with us. If you have questions, please email us at contact@financialpodcast.ca.
Hello, and welcome to the Financial Podcast. My name is Gary Poyer. The Financial Podcast is brought to you by Customplan Financial Advisors, an award-winning managing general agency that provides exceptional support and resources to the independent financial advisor. Please visit customplanfinancial.com to see all the resources that are available to you as the independent financial advisor. The topic for discussion today is success and what it takes for you to be successful. And because this is such an important topic, and because we have such a qualified guest with us, we're going to break our discussion into two podcasts, this being part one. And speaking of our guest, we're very fortunate to have with us today Rod Burylo. Rod is the manager of EMD and IFM services, and he chairs the investment review committee for Axcess Capital Advisors. Rod has worked throughout the financial services industry for a wide variety of companies in the roles of chief compliance officer, chief financial officer, and as a director. For over 30 years, Rod has been designing and delivering continuing education as a writer and speaker on the topic of business ethics and professional responsibility for several designations and registration categories, including the CPA, CFP, PBA, and IIROC. He is a 2004 Canadian Advisor of the Year award winner, a 2019 Champion of Financial Literacy Award finalist, and author of 3 books, the latest being The Wealthy Buddhist. Rod also consults to boards and leadership teams on topics that include governance, communication strategy, and regulatory compliance. He has served on the board of public and private companies, as well as professional associations and not-for-profits, including the National Exempt Market Association, Foundation for the Advancement of Entrepreneurship, and the Public Business Accountant Society. Rod, welcome to the Financial Podcast.
Hi, thank you very much, Gary.
Is there anything that I missed that you'd like to add for our audience's sake?
Well, one of the things I think advisors sometimes find interesting is my undergraduate degree from the University of Calgary is actually in philosophy. My specialty was applied ethics and jurisprudence, or the philosophy of law, and that included postgraduate research in biomedical ethics. So one of the reasons I'm interested in professional ethics in our industry comes from my academic background in that.
Okay, very cool. I don't know a lot of financial advisors that are philosophical as well, so I'm really looking forward to our discussion in this session and the next one as well. Rod, let me ask you, when you first started out in the financial services industry, what goals did you set for yourself?
Well, initially, Gary, the goals were very modest. I was very young. I was right out of university, and it was really just about making enough money to support my wife and children. But after a couple of years, I started getting a little bit better at goal setting, and they tended to fall into 3 different categories specifically. So I would set goals around business development or income, of course. Mm-hmm. I would also set very specific goals regarding education, continuing education, or attaining designations and what have you. Mm-hmm. And then I would always have a goal category around reward. And actually, very often I would encourage my children that were quite young at the time to help me with the reward category, as they tended to be a family holiday of some kind. And I would try to include them in the goal setting part of the process, which was always fun.
Wow, that's excellent. I haven't heard too many people that actually includes their kids or their family in goal setting. So that's excellent. Rod, did you always want to become part of senior management or an author or a financial expert? Can you tell me how you came about that? Was that something that you consciously set for yourself, or did your career just evolve into the point where you became who you are today?
Well, the writing and the management roles are really very different activities that resulted from different things. So let's talk about the writing first. As a person that studies philosophy, or did study philosophy, it's really a writing type of degree. I also did postgraduate level activity in literature, as I thought I might be an English teacher, were the financial services industry not to work out for me. And so I write because I like to write, and I've always written. And so right away, coming out of university, I was a columnist, a paid columnist for some print media back in the late 80s. And that included writing for magazines and so on throughout the 90s. In more recent times, little of my writing shows up in print other than the books, but very often you'll find me as a source or a contributor to some national media organization. I always knew that I would want to write books if I felt that I had something to say on a topic that might be of interest. So that was kind of something that I always did, and I expect I will always do. The senior management activity was quite a bit different a thing. For me, that came from two main places. One is as I was working through the financial services space and started to get involved in leadership at a retail or branch level, and began to become aware of the industry, beyond the bubble that many advisors often find themselves in early in their career. One of the things for me is that I was increasingly disappointed with processes, governance-related processes, compliance processes, ethics topics, and really felt that I wanted to do what I could to improve on some of the things in our industry that I don't think works very well. So there was that growing desire, and then something happened in the industry that presented the opportunity to make a big step. And that was really around the introduction of National Instrument 31103 back in 2010. It created a need for new designations and registration categories, new dealership types, and there was all of a sudden this gap opened up, and I happened to be well positioned to participate in that. So I ended up owning Canada's largest exempt market dealership. We grew the firm from 3 people to 95 people, including a merger, and that was within about a year and a bit. And so the senior management was my interest in improving things, coupled with a really amazing opportunity that just happened to show up, and I was fortunate I was in a place in my life that I could dive into that and make the most of it.
Right. But you're prepared.
Just to add to that, for me, what I find intellectually stimulating about the industry, why I stay in it and why I think I'll stay in it for a long time, is the opportunity at leadership levels to improve upon our industry, to professionalize it for the benefit of advisors as well as consumers.
Okay, excellent. So when you first started out as a young man, how did you grow your business?
Yeah, so, I had not a very sophisticated first few years in terms of attracting, say, clients in a retail space. I was doing some writing, asking for referrals, and doing all the kind of stuff that you'd imagine a person would do, and having pretty average results, although sufficient results, but nothing earth-shattering. Where that changed was when we were recruiting for the new dealership. And the specific thing that worked extremely well for me, when that exempt market dealership opportunity came up back in around 2010, I launched, with support of one of the proficiency providers in Canada, what we were calling a boot camp or a workshop for advisors to, over the course of 2 days, 2 long days, prepare themselves to complete an exam to become a registrant. And I was doing that, so that was an activity that produced revenue for me. But I used that opportunity to be in front of these rooms full of advisors to talk about the dealership that we are creating, especially as it related to compliance and governance and policies and procedures and those kinds of topics. And I messaged to them very strongly that we were going to take that stuff extremely seriously. And if they were not taking it seriously, I said, do me a favor, go work for my competitors. But if you want to be at a dealership that's going to grow and be around and have a great reputation, come join us. And so the two things that made that grow really quickly was focusing on the education part for advisors. And so supporting them at a time, a big change was going on. They needed some kind of guidance and so on. And then the second part of that was presenting, and this is the way I often put it, is taking compliance and policies, procedures, and governance from a mid-office functionality to front office. That is to say, make it an actual upfront verbal part of the value proposition to the growth of the business, that conversation up front. And that worked extremely well, and that business grew very, very quickly. And I think it's also one of the reasons I was able to exit relatively quickly and satisfactorily for me, is it was perceived as being a good business that somebody else would want to own. So that's probably my best anecdote on business growth and development.
Okay. Well, you know what? Over the 10 minutes that we've been talking, you mentioned a few words over and over again: opportunity and growth, and that kind of leads me into the very next question. I've heard a lot of different definitions when it comes to success and what success is, but when it comes to the meaning of success, how do you define success?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, as a person that likes philosophy and literature and so on, the meanings of words are super important to me. I mean, philosophers will write entire books on single words. I designed a class for IIROC space called All About Integrity, literally an hour talking about the various ways that the word integrity is used in our industry and stuff. So I do kind of get a little stuck on that. And success is one of the words I've thought a lot about. So at the basic level, the success, as I understand it, is simply about setting and accomplishing goals. That's it. And so that basic understanding of success then becomes very much a personal experience. What you think is your goal and how you go about pursuing that. If you want to play the guitar and you set that as a goal and you accomplish it, that's great. That is success in those particular terms. And so to be more successful in the basic way, if you get better at goal setting, then you will tend to be more likely to accomplish those goals and more likely to be considering yourself successful. But there's a kind of an advanced way of looking at success, and this is kind of where I've moved to over the years. And it comes from a tautology that I'll share with you, and that is that if you do what everybody does, the way that everybody does it, you will have the same results as everybody, which by definition for me is mediocrity. And the implication of that tautology, though, is that if you want to have an unusual life experience, including unusual success, you've got to be prepared to do something that not everybody is doing. And that inherently is a risk. It's an interesting risk. It's kind of like if you think of teenagers in high school, a great number of them will kind of look and dress and present themselves, as per the masses do, in part because the risk of presenting themselves differently can either be a very successful outcome or for some what they would call not a successful outcome for themselves. And there is risk inherent to that. But if you want to do something unusual and have some unusual experiences, you really got to be prepared to take on the kind of risk to do that and possibly not succeed at it. And in my case, that was things like, introducing philosophy and ethics into my work and my writing and my leadership activities in a way that, as you said earlier, these are your words, I don't know anybody in the financial services industry and leadership roles that comes from a background in philosophy. And sure, there are probably some out there, but it would be considered to be unusual. So it's being mentally prepared to go to a place of taking that kind of risk and recognizing that it may not work out. And one of the messages for advisors is one of the reasons I wanted to support you on this podcast today is that the implication for advisors is they got to look at the environment that they're in and ask themselves, am I in an environment, a work environment with an organization or people that merely enable me to do what everybody else does the way that everybody else does it and achieve mediocrity? Or have I put myself in a place that will allow me to do unusual and different things and it's considered to be acceptable, and recognizing that some of those are going to work out and some not? But at least then we have a chance of doing something unusual and having some unusual life experiences.
Right. So if I understand what you're saying, not every organization will allow a financial advisor to approach things differently or the way that they actually feel more comfortable. Right?
That's very accurate, yeah. And one of the expressions that I often use lately when it comes to that is self-actualize as a person. Boy, this is going to be possibly contentious to some of the audience, but let's go here. there is a cult in business today around entrepreneurship, and we idolize entrepreneurs, especially famous entrepreneurs and so on. And it becomes kind of a thing that the people that are running a small business, like many financial advisors are, like to think themselves as being entrepreneurial, and that gets encouraged in certain work environments. The reality is that they're, in my opinion, not. They are self-employed, but they're more like a franchise owner. They're given products and services and systems, and it is very much about an organization's brand, which is fine. I get that. I mean, there are shareholders and stakeholders that, that's how they benefit. But at the advisor level, then they have to come to a point where they want to be part of a franchise management system, or do they want to be more entrepreneurial and make their own choices around branding and communication within the parameters of compliance and policies and procedures, of course, but to have that kind of experience. And that really often is about what kind of dealerships we associate ourselves with in our industry. And there's certain dealerships that do a really good job of encouraging independent thought, and I think there are some that don't do that to the same degree.
Yeah, for sure. So if a financial advisor is more entrepreneurial in the sense that they're the creative in their marketing approach, do you think that differentiation really will help them stand out compared to other financial advisors, and that's how you became successful?
Yeah, it comes back to the same premise. If you want to have unusual outcomes, you need to be able to do things that are different. And I'll give you an example, a different kind of example. You mentioned earlier that I won an Advisor of the Year award in Canada in 2004. That was for a business I created with a couple of partners called Canadians Retiring Abroad. And we were very focused on differentiation, and we marked 3 points of differentiation that we were going to pursue. Differentiation by product, by purpose, and by process. So by product, we were actually able to create a international healthcare group plan. It didn't end up doing very well, but we were actually in a situation where we could actually create product, which most advisors never get a chance to do that. So that was kind of cool and a way to differentiate. The other thing, people in financial services, Spain's Retired Abroad was very focused on a Canadian wanting to have a international experience and adventure in retirement, something completely different. And the products and services that we provided were just means to that end. They weren't the value prop. And then the final part of that differentiation was process. So we did some cool things to engage clients. We had international retirement conferences on cruise ships and at resorts in Mexico. Yeah, pretty cool, Gary. And people would attend, they on their own dime, and we would do some workshops over the course of usually a week, and that would include some experiences on land to see where Canadians were retiring, where they were shopping and hanging out and stuff like that. And in fact, the biggest one I ever organized, we had about 150 people at it in the Cancun area.
Wow.
To reinforce something that perhaps I'm starting to sound like I'm beating to death, there are certain environments for advisors where they just couldn't go there with that form of differentiation. And it would be uncomfortable to their senior management. And I needed to put myself into a work situation that it would allow me to explore those kinds of interesting activities. And, some of them worked out from a business perspective very well, and some of them didn't, but that's okay. I mean, it's a necessary part of being different, is to recognize that not everything you do is going to produce amazing results. But if you keep on the basic path, you'll produce a lot more interesting things than things that don't work out. Yeah. So that's on the differentiation for advisors to stand out in a very noisy market.
Yeah, absolutely. Rod, what are 3 habits that you have that you believe have led you to be successful?
Yeah, I'd say that the first thing is really about having a very organized schedules. And it doesn't mean that I work a lot. I went to half-time work a number of years ago, but the schedule that I keep is very organized. I'm constantly putting things into my calendar and constantly reorganizing it, because I have a list of things that I want to accomplish weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. Often I'll write these down at a business plan, at the end of a year, looking out to the next year, organize it. But the critical thing for me is always putting things in a calendar. If it's in the calendar, I get it done. Mm-hmm. And what stems from that is two other habits. One is I always put in exercise first in the calendar, and then I book business activities and educational activities around that. And so it doesn't work the opposite way. If I exercise almost every day, it keeps my mind sharp. I feel awesome. And everything else I do in life is better because I feel great. And then the other thing I do with the calendar is to add in my social activities, my travel activities. And we'll tend to do those first. And then, because the business plan is to support a great life. The business plan is not a business plan in and of itself. It's so that I can have fun and grow old healthy with my wife and those kinds of objectives. Mm-hmm. So the habits are keeping a very organized schedule that you stick to, but including in that schedule documented exercise time and reward travel time.
I find it very interesting because, so many financial advisors and business people, their life is the business. And, as you said, the business should be supporting their lifestyle. And,
and I'm a fan of work. I don't intend to retire in the classic sense. I like this. I want to keep contributing as long as I can. But, it's not a life if it's just business. Business is required to support some other things. But I guess it's the total, I don't want to use a word that's overused, but it's really about balance between time at leisure and time at work, really. I think a big challenge as people go through their career, and I know we're all experience this up front, and if you're listening to this and you're early in your career and you're frustrated that you don't feel like you have balance yet, don't worry. If you work it, you will. And sometimes balance doesn't occur from week to week. Sometimes it occurs from year to year. But, certainly early in our career, we all work 12-hour days. But the people that keep working 12-hour days at the expense of their health or their relationships are making a mistake, in my opinion.
Yeah. And you mentioned about exercising. You need that physical activity in order to create the energy that you need to do your job as well. And I think a lot of people overlook that as well.
Yeah, I don't feel normal if I'm not exercising regularly. And if I ever start becoming aware of negative thoughts or feeling not 100%, the first thing I will ask myself is, did I miss a day of exercise or a day of, and it doesn't mean that it's overly hard. I'm not trying to impress anybody, but simply making sure that you've got that physical activity in there just, for me, does wonders for my mental space.
Perfect. Okay, well, it looks like we're just about out of time for part one of our podcast on success and what it takes to be successful. Thank you again, Rod, for being our guest today and for providing such great value and insight. It's very much appreciated. Audience, be sure to tune in for part two of our podcast because you don't want to miss the additional value and insight that Rod will be providing. Rod, how can our audience get in touch with you?
Probably the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. It's a great way to communicate, keep each other up to date with what's going on in our life. So look for me there if you'd like to find me. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. And I want to thank our sponsor once more, Customplan Financial Advisors. Customplan Financial Advisors is an award-winning MGA providing exceptional support and resources to the independent financial advisor. Please visit their website at customplanfinancial.com. This podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, and at financialpodcast.ca. To be notified directly when new podcasts are available, please subscribe by visiting financialpodcast.ca. If you have an idea or a topic for a podcast, or if you know of someone who would make a great guest, please send an email to info@financialpodcast.ca. We'd also love to receive your feedback. Thank you again, Rod, and to everyone else, have a fabulous day.
The views expressed here are those of the participants and not those of Customplan Financial Advisors, Inc., its affiliates, or subsidiaries. This is not intended to serve as a complete analysis of every material fact regarding any company, industry, or security. This presentation may contain forward-looking statements. Investors are cautioned not to place undue reliance on such statements, as actual results could vary. This site and podcasts are for general information purposes only and does not constitute investment advice and is not intended as an endorsement of any specific investment product or service. Individual investors should consult with an investment professional about their personal situation. Past performance is not indicative of future results. If you are unsure about what is the best course of action for you in your financial planning, then we suggest you consult a fee-based independent financial advisor or get in touch with us to discuss your individual situation. Our phone number is 604-687-7773.